Hi everyone, welcome to week 43 of a grid design every week. This week I'm going to do a little something different. I'm not going to show you a new grid design, but I'm going to show you how I mark my grids on my quilts. For all of our demos I normally use the pre-printed practice panels, but I know you wonder, how do you actually mark a quilt? So I'm going to show you the tools I use and how to mark a horizontal vertical grid, a diagonal grid, and a couple of different diamond grids. So come on over to my sewing table and I will show you what we're going to do. Alright, so I've marked a little piece of muslin with 4 6-inch blocks, and that's what I'm going to show you the grid on. But let me move that and show you my favorite grid marking stencil. This is I buy them from the stencil company, and you can too. If you're interested, the number is SCL 461-00. And I don't sell those on my website just because it would cost me as much to ship this to you as it does for the stencil itself. I do sell them in all my classes and when I'm doing events, but I can't ship them. So if you are interested, get one from the stencil company. They're more equipped for shipping than that. But you'll notice this has long straight lines, which are nice, and if you use this, all your intersections are connected, and I will talk about that in a minute. Some of the older stencils we used, the intersections weren't connected, so we had to go back in with our pen and mark them. You'll also notice this has a 45-degree line for marking your diagonal grid, and a 30 and a 60-degree line for marking diamond grids. So I'm going to show you how to use that in a second. I also want to show you the two marking tools that I use, and these are the only ones I use. They're my favorites. So this is the Clover, I actually accidentally cut the top off. Clover thick tip blue marking pen. It's a wash away pen. You wash it away with cold clear water, and I use this for light colors and even some mediums. And then this white pen I use for dark colors. Let me just show you briefly how the white pen works. The white pen goes away with heat, so it goes away with ironing, but I always say it disappears, but it's not really gone. So I wash all my quilts with warm water when they have these kind of marks. But the way this works is, when you first mark, it doesn't show up. But as you can see, hopefully the camera's going to pick that up, that line's getting darker and darker as a few seconds go by. So that's how those work. And like I said, these wash away with warm water, and if you can't get all the marks out, I use a burst of steam from the iron, and that hot steam pushing through makes them go away completely. So that's what I use for dark fabric. So let's get that out of here. Today we're going to use our blue wash away marker, and let me get our sample ready. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is just right up here show you a simple horizontal vertical grid. Now this grid marking tool is good for 1/2 inch grid or 1 inch. So I think just to save time today we'll do 1 inch, and that would be skipping every other line. So you lay a straight line of your grid line with a straight line on your quilt. And this might be a seam line, or it might be a marked line in somewhere where you're going to quilt. So you just lay it there on the edge, and then you mark the lines. And I will show you what that's going to look like in just a second. So we're just doing our vertical lines right now. Okay, I'm going to take this off. So you can see that quickly I got 1 inch vertical lines. If you were using a ruler, that would have taken you quite a bit longer. So let me move this around. Now we're going to mark our horizontal lines. Again, you want to lay a line in your grid stencil with a straight line, whether that's something you've drawn or it's a seam line. And you just mark, and you see I'm skipping every other line to get the 1 inch grid. Alright, let's see, I think I missed a spot there. Sometimes it's hard with the blue to see through the grid, but there we go. So here's our 1 inch horizontal vertical line, grid. All right, so let's move over to the next block. And we will do a diagonal grid. So for the diagonal grid, you're going to use the 45-degree line. And you're going to lay a 45. It's just like with your cutting ruler. You need to lay that 45-degree line somewhere on a straight line. I am going to lay that 45 right there. Now you'll notice these grids actually have a gap in the middle. That's to make the grid stencil stronger. So we have to have that, but you have to go in later and fill in that gap, and I will show you how I do that. So again, I'm just doing a 1-inch diagonal grid. And that 45 is right on that straight line of that 6-inch block that I drew. Okay, so that's that. Let me show you what it looks like here. So you can see there's gaps in that grid. You want me to shut the window? Maybe we can get better lighting. Okay, it's kind of hard to see this, I realize. So what I would just do there is, I call it budging up that little, the grid stencil. Just budge it up a bit, fill in those gaps where the stencil had a gap in it. And it's very easy. And now we have our diagonal lines all full. So to do the diagonal lines going the other way, I flip the grid over, and again putting the 45-degree line on a straight line, whether it's a seam or something you've drawn. Line that up good. Now with grids, you do want to be careful and accurate. That's kind of why I love this grid so much. It's much more accurate than using a ruler to mark your grids. And you can see how quickly this is. When I teach my grid quilting classes, usually most people buy the grid, so you can see that. And again, we have that little gap right here, but I'll just move the grid stencil up and fill that in right now. Most of my students buy this marking stencil from me. I don't include it in the kit just in case they don't want to own one forever, but it is an optional item when I teach, and almost everybody buys one. And I just noticed that they are marking their grid practice panels 2 to 3 times more quickly than the people using the ruler. So it's quite handy. Alright, so here we have a horizontal vertical. Here's the diagonal grid. Now let me do a diamond grid for you. We'll work down here. So for that, we are going to lay our 30-degree line somewhere on a straight edge. I'm going to move this down here so I can get maximum coverage in my block. So you see that 30-degree line? I'm lining it up with the edge of my little 6-inch block here, and I'm going to start marking. Again, we'll do it 1 inch so I can do it more quickly, and we'll just do every other line in the grid. Alright, so I just have one little spot down here that I didn't fill in, but we're not going to worry about that now. So you can see our first set of 30-degree lines. Now flip it over just like we did with the diagonal grid. Lay that 30-degree line over here, and I'm going to start. I'll move that down just a little. Now if you're doing this, you're going to want to be careful about where you actually start your grid line so that your little corners come out more accurate. But let's look at that. So there's our diamond grid. See what I'm saying? You would want to lay your grid so you don't have funny little spots like this. You would want to be a little more careful about placement, but I'm just trying to do this quickly and show you. That's how we achieve a diamond grid. Now remember, let me show you something else here. I'll get a little ruler. If you ever want to make an isometric triangular grid, I'll go ahead and draw a line across here, and you can see, you get your triangles, and that's an isometric grid if you did every diamond with lines across it. Okay, our last grid, there's a fly in this room. We're having lots of rain and humidity, and the flies are, I don't know, they're going crazy. All right, so another diamond grid would be where we do horizontal first, vertical lines first. Let me move this down. I don't know the proper terminology for this type of diamond grid. When I've quilted it on quilts, I call it hanging diamonds. But I know there's a real mathematical term, which I don't know it. So you guys are going to have to work with me. So for this diamond grid, first of all, we do vertical lines like that. And then we put our 30-degree. Let me move this over here. I'm going to, there we go. Put our 30-degree line at the edge of our block. And mark that. So yeah, when I've quilted this, I've called it hanging diamonds. But see that, oops, I missed a line there. That would be your alternate diamond grid that you would use vertical lines and then the 30-degree. So with just this one stencil, you can get 4 different types of grids. And it's as easy as that. So that's how you would mark your quilt. And again, if you have a light color quilt, use the blue pen. If you have dark fabrics, you can use the white pen or the marking tool of your choice. So that's our demo on marking grids. Thanks for joining me this week, and I will see you next week for another grid-based quilting design. Bye.